Good morning, good morning all. This is the second video on the characteristics of Germanic or Teutonic languages. So far we have covered till ablaut and umlaut, and now we are going to discuss the fourth point, that is the Teutonic accent. The fourth one, that is Teutonic accent. That is the accent of Germanic language compared to Indo-European languages. How it differs, or how is it have any similarity with the parent language Indo-European, that we are going to discuss. Indo-European language has a pitch or musical accent. Indo-European language follow a pitch accent or musical accent, but compared to that, the primitive Germanic language has a stress accent. In a primitive Germanic language, the stress accent become dominant. In primitive Germanic language, it shows a strong tendency to fix the stress on the first syllable. As far as the primitive Germanic language is concerned, it shows a strong tendency to fix the stress on the first syllable usually. But this was not the case in Indo-European, where the accent could fall on any syllable of the word. That means Indo-European language shows a tendency to fix the accent on the first syllable, but Indo-European language has a varying accent. It depends upon the context only. This tendency of primitive Germanic, that is the tendency of primitive Germanic to fix the accent on the first syllable, led to the weakening and sometimes the loss of unstressed syllable, particularly towards the end of a word. When we give more emphasis to the first syllable, gradually the end syllable, the syllable towards the end of the word become weakened and it became elided. Primitive Germanic has the accent on the first syllable, and as a result, the unstressed syllables, particularly the unstressed syllable towards the end, gradually becomes elided. Clear? So, primitive Germanic language, it has a stress accent, whereas in the European language it follows a musical accent. Primitive Germanic language show a tendency to fix the stress on the first syllable, whereas Indo-European follow a varying accent. Because of this tendency of primitive Germanic language to fix the accent on the first syllable, the unstressed syllable towards the end of that word became weakened and gradually it lost that the weak syllable towards the end of that word. Okay, consider the example. The Indo-European word of this modern English word to bear, the Indo-European word of to bear is Beranom, and the primitive Germanic, and in primitive Germanic it becomes Beranan. Gradually, in Old English, the final an of the word Beranan, an, the suffix was lost and became Beran. And further changes happens during the transition to Middle English, and the an, the an of Baran was weakened to en. Baran become Baran. That the tendency to lengthen that ending and ending was weakened, and it became en. It is pronounced as not an but n. In course of Middle English period, the final n was lost and the word became bear. But still it was a disyllabic word, bear. Finally, at the end of Middle English period, the final e was lost and modern English form with a single syllable. Modern English, that word became a single syllabled one, that is bear. Thus, Beranom became modern English word bear. Beranom, Beranan, then it becomes Baran, then Baran, bear, and later it becomes bear. Because of this It is because of the tendency of the primitive Germanic language to fix the accent on the first syllable. Because of that, the ending got weakened, and it gradually it got that end portion became elided. Clear? This is about the Teutonic accent. It is because of this tendency of primitive Germanic, most of the inflections got lost. And the next one, it's verbal system, the verbal system of primitive Germanic language. In the verbal system, that the primitive Germanic, in this verbal system, that the primitive Germanic language made one of its own distinct development. One of the most significant development was on the verbal system. That is, from the parent language, it inherited a whole set of verbs which showed a change of tense by changing the vowel of the stem. This Germanic language, it inherited a whole series of verbs, but the primitive Germanic showed a great tendency to change the tense by changing the vowel of the stem, that we have discussed during the session on ablaut and umlaut. Strong verb, it changed the tense by changing the vowel of the stem, not by adding certain suffix or not by adding certain suffixes, but by changing the vowel in the root word itself. Thus, that changes the word, the word itself changes, and usually it follows the case of strong verbs. Strong verbs, you know, right? Strong verbs are verbs in which the vowel in the stem is changed to indicate the tense. This vowel in the root word got changed, like sit, sat, run, ran. The root vowel, the vowel in the root word got changed. That kind of change happens in strong verbs. When not that kind of a change happens in strong verbs in order to indicate the tense. Such kind of a verbal system is followed by this primitive Germanic language. The verbal system of primitive Germanic. Example, the word ridan, it becomes rad and then riden. Here, in the word ridden, e sound, it becomes rad and then ridden. So the root word, the Indo-Germanic verbal, the not Indo-Germanic but primitive Germanic verbal system. In the primitive Germanic verbal system, it shows a tendency to change the vowel of the root word itself in order to indicate a change in tense. Clear? Then next, about the simplification of inflectional system. As there is a simplification of inflectional system compared to parent language, the case distinction also got reduced. That means primitive Germanic has only 5 case distinction, whereas the Indo-Germanic language has 8 different case distinction. The case distinction preserved in primitive Germanic were, I have already told you that primitive Germanic has only 5 case distinction compared to Indo-European language, that the parent language Indo-European, that possesses 8 case distinction. The case distinctions preserved in Germanic languages were nominative, then accusative, genitive, dative and instrumental. And these separate case distinction, they have separate inflection for singular and plural. For example, stone, the word stone. They shows different separate inflection for singular and plural in the same case itself. That means, for example, nominative, as far as the case of nominative or the nominative case, the word stone has 2 different cases or 2 separate inflections are there. That is, for singular it is stan and for plural it's stanus. Same is the case with all other case distinction. That means they show separate inflection for singular and plural. So for accusative it's stan and stanus. Stan for singular and stanus for plural. And for genitive, stanus and stana. Dative, it's chain and stannum. Different case distinctions are there for singular and plural. Clear? Then declension of adjectives. The last point, the last characteristics of primitive Germanic language is the declension of adjective. Declension. Declension. What do you mean by declension? Declension meaning the variation of the form of a noun, pronoun or adjective by which the grammatical case, number and gender are identified. Variation in the form of a noun, pronoun or adjective by which the grammatical case, number, gender can be identified. That is declension. In Indo-European language, that is the parent language, the Indo-European language from which Germanic language emerged or evolved, the inflections of the adjectives were the same as the noun inflection. The inflections of both the adjectives and the noun has the same type of inflections in Indo-European language. They had to be put in the same case or number as the noun they were attached to. That means they have the same inflection for both adjectives and noun. Thus, in Latin, we have three forms of adjective. Great. See the example. In Latin language, there are three forms for the adjective great. Three different cases for masculine, feminine and neuter. For example, for the word great, if the case is masculine, it is Magnus. And the same word great has magna for feminine, and the great, the same word great has the neuter, the magnum as the magnum for the case neuter. So there are three different case distinction for masculine, feminine and neuter for the same word itself. For this is the case with Indo-European language, Indo-European inflectional system, or this is the case, different case distinction possessed by Indo-European language. Then what about primitive Germanic? In the case of primitive Germanic, it developed two distinct set of inflection for adjectives. That is, two different set for adjective. There are two different set of inflection. Separate inflection for strong and weak declension. This distinct set of inflections, that is for the strong and the weak, this distinct set of inflections for adjectives were a further modification that happened to Germanic language. This separate distinction for adjective itself, two separate distinction for adjective is a later addition to Germanic, a later modification of Germanic language. The Indo-European language has the same inflection for adjectives and noun, but here for primitive Germanic language, there are two separate inflection for the adjective itself. That means strong and weak declension for adjectives. And this differentiation is a later modification of Germanic language. That is, to add to it, when a possessive, a demonstrative or the definite article preceded the adjective, it had a weak declension. What is weak declension, or how can we identify that it's a weak declension? That is, if an article, a definite article is preceded to the adjective, it had weak declension. And if the adjective occurred alone before the noun, it had strong declension. Two types of declensions for adjectives are there in primitive Germanic. They are strong declension and weak declension. Strong declension means if the adjective stand alone before the noun, it has a strong declension. And if a definite article is added before the adjective, it is weak declension. Clear? Okay. Weak declension, the declension part of a weak noun. What do you mean by weak declension? Weak declension is the declension part of a weak noun. Modern English has two vestiges of weak noun. Modern English, I shall repeat, modern English has two vestiges of weak noun inflection in common use. Strong declension A class of word in many Germanic languages, including English, which alter regularly than by suffixation, which alters irregularly. We have dealt with irregular words, irregular plurals while we discuss ablaut and umlaut. Umlaut. Remember it, right? So strong declensions happen irregular strong declension happen when the word alter irregularly than by suffixation. Example, goose. The word goose, see the example, refer the example which we dealt with yesterday. Tooth, teeth, they are irregular uh, the irregular words. So weak declension and strong declension. Primitive Germanic developed two distinct set of inflection, strong and weak declension. For example, the Old English word, consider the Old English word goat man. That means a good man. Good man. The word for good man is goat man in Old English. Goat man, it has strong declension because there is an adjective followed adjective before there is an adjective followed by a noun. So it is weak declension. But in the word the good man, that the Old English word for the good man, the modern English word the good man is say goddamn man. It's a weak declension because the definite article the is preceded before the adjective. The definite article is there before the adjective, so it's weak declension. And for modern English, there is no change in the form of adjective. There is no such differentiation in modern English. This is all about Indo-European the characteristics of, this is all about the characteristics of Indo-European not sorry this is the characteristics of Germanic languages. So to conclude, these are the characteristics of Germanic languages which we have discussed all together. Grimm's law, first one is Grimm's law, second one Werner's law, third one ablaut and umlaut, fourth one the Teutonic accent, fifth one the verbal system, then simplification of inflectional system, and the last one declension of adjectives. If you have any doubt, feel free to ask me. Thank you.